Before we continue with developing plugins, I want to finally talk about how hooks, actions, and filters work. This lecture will demystify the concepts behind these topics. Understanding hooks isn't all that easy, partly because the terms themselves are rather tricky to visualize and distinguish from one another. But the payoff is huge. As a developer, I find that working with filters and actions is probably the most common way I interact with WordPress. And over time, it's become one of my favorite things to do in WordPress as well. Particularly, in this case, understanding the terms is half the battle. The WordPress Codex uses all three terms very casually and inconsistently. We're going to try to clarify those uses here. These are what the terms really mean, although you will find them used differently in many places. Let's start to define our terms. WordPress's name for our topic is the Plugin API, but I would have preferred the Hooks API. Hooks are the dominant concept that we need to understand to make WordPress actions and filters work for us. So between us, let's privately call the actions, hooks, and filters piece of WordPress the Hooks API and move on. This is just to get started. Don't worry if this doesn't make total sense at the moment. A hook is a place in WordPress's code that can get functions added to it. When you create a hook in WordPress, you give yourself and other developers the opportunity to add in additional functionality at that location. Hooked functions are the pieces of external code that can be added into WordPress's processing at the location specified by its hooks. In other words, these are the functions that get hooked into WordPress. Two types of hooked functions exist: actions, also called action functions, and filters, also called filter functions. Filters modify existing output, while actions can do any type of custom functionality. Hooks come in two types: action hooks and filter hooks, according to which type of hooked functions they accept. Good so far? Don't worry either way, and let's move on. I'll show you some examples soon enough. To explain hooks, we will think of WordPress as a big factory. The factory kicks on whenever a visitor browses to your site and manufactures the specific webpage they've asked for. This webpage has the contents of one or more posts, as well as a header, footer, sidebar, and so on. By the way, WordPress as a factory is probably the best analogy there is for how WordPress works in general, because it's almost a literal description of how WordPress actually works, except with digital factory equipment, aka PHP files, and raw materials, aka the database contents, rather than physical ones. We can think of custom code, including code from both functions.php theme functions and WordPress plugins, as outside contractors that help the WordPress factory do its web page assembly work. Hooks, both action hooks and filter hooks, are the gateway into the parts of the WordPress factory where these outside contractors go to do their work. The core WordPress software is a rather simple factory. There's also a lot it can do by default. Everything from display today's date at the top of every page to create e-commerce product pages complete with price, shipping, and payment information. WordPress can handle these special orders, but to do it, it needs outside contractors. This is where functions.php, other custom code, and plugins come into play. Our contractors don't have a permanent place in the factory. They're stuck in the lobby until they're invited in by the factory itself. Hooks are how this WordPress factory invites in any contractors that might be needed. We can think of WordPress hooks as a bunch of actual giant factory hooks, which the contractors write on. Like this image, each hook is labeled with a specific name, such as WP head, corresponding to a part of the WordPress's factory process. In the case of WP head, the process of building the page's HTML head section. These hooks travel out of the lobby so that contractors can write them in, and they do it in a specific order. The WP head hook travels out to the lobby and back right before the head tag completes. The WP footer hook travels to the lobby and back right before the body tag completes, and so on. So the contractor is always writing this hook directly to the active to be worked on part of the factory. When a contractor wants to be part of a specific process, he waits for that hook to show up at the entrance and rides that hook straight into the proper part of the factory. If the contractor didn't ride the proper hook in, he couldn't get to where he's going in the factory. Hooks are what invites outside code into defined areas of WordPress's PHP processing. We're halfway to understanding hooks, actions, and filters. The other part is a bit more specific. The factory has two kinds of hooks: action hooks and filter hooks. The action hooks tend to get dangled at milestones, like you're almost done building the page's head section, or you're almost done building the page's body section. When contractors write action hooks into the factory, they tend to do just about anything they want, add a bunch of stuff to the page, or do completely other things like log an error or even send an email. The filter hooks work a bit differently. Contractors who ride in on action hooks can do whatever they want and have no responsibility to anyone. But contractors who ride in on filter hooks actually insert themselves in the normal worker's process. They're given something to handle, say a block of text, and have to give that same block of text slightly modified to the regular worker via a PHP return statement. So a contractor using a filter hook generally doesn't just do whatever he wants. He works with a piece of work that he's given in the section of the factory. This section works on the post title. The sections manager might say, do whatever you want to the post title, but if you don't hand me back the post title after you made your changes, the whole process won't work properly. I hope I'm making sense so far. Now we're going to get a bit more technical so you can actually start writing these things. The contractors are specialized PHP functions. Because these functions make it into WordPress by attaching themselves to WordPress hooks, that is being hooked in from outside, the formal term for them is hooked functions. There are two kinds of hooked functions: actions, also called action functions, which hook into WordPress's action hooks, and filters, also called filter functions, which hook onto WordPress's filter hooks. Enough talk. Let's actually write some code to take a look what all this looks like. I'm going to create a brand new plugin called hooksexample.php. Inside the plugins folder, I'm not going to create a folder for this plugin, as everything will be contained in this one file. Also, since this is just an example, I'm not too concerned on organization. I'm going to set the plugin name to hooksexample. Activate this plugin and let's get started. I'm going to use the function addFilter. This is how filter hooks are started. You tell WordPress that you would like to filter particular data by calling this function. This function has the same parameters as the addAction function. The hook we want to get is called theTitle. This hook runs when a post is being displayed and its title is being outputted or returned. The function I want to run is called juTitle. Let's define this function now. Filter hooks will always have at least one argument. In this case, the title is passed on to us. This is the original title. WordPress expects us to return this title or a modified version of this title. Alternatively, we can give a completely different title. I'm going to return the text hooked, followed by the original title. Save your work and visit the homepage. You'll notice all our posts now have the text hooked before the title. Let's take a look at action hooks now. We've already done this a bunch of times in our theme, but let's take a closer look. I'm going to create an action hook and I want to hook into the WP footer hook. The function I want to call is juFooterShoutout. Define this function underneath and echo out hook example plugin was here. Save your work and refresh the page. Scroll down to the very bottom and you'll see the message outputted. One thing you'll notice about action functions is that they do not need to return anything. They don't even need to echo out anything. You can do whatever you want, from querying the database or sending out an email. The code in here can work behind the scenes. In the next lecture, we'll take a look at how to create our own custom hooks and prioritizing hooks. By doing this, we'll actually see how hooks work more in depth.